hoping that everybody's had a good day. Hoping that everybody has thawed out a little bit. The temperatures around here have increased to what my wife calls really horrible. And you can just imagine how bad it was back in the earlier part of the week when it was just absolutely unbearable. Vermont can take their winter right back. All right. On a serious note, though, I hope everybody is doing well. I know that I have friends that have been directly affected by this. If you are watching this on a VOD because you are without power, I really do hope you all are doing okay. I could say a whole bunch more stuff, but I think we'll just sort of we'll do the history stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, this is Adventures in History, a show where we talk about history and we talk about fun stuff in history and we make fun of history and make fun out of history and all of that stuff. Because history doesn't have to be boring, right? It doesn't all have to just be people in tweed jackets with elbow pads sitting in dark rooms with giant stacks of books, though it can be that too. And one day I have no doubt that I'll be one of those people. But for now, I'm a little bit more spry and a little bit more engaged, and hope everybody's having a good one. Hey, Finn, how's it going? Welcome, welcome. Yeah, Adventures in History. So Thursday nights we go through history in chronological order, and we are still looking at stream information from last stream, so I need to fix that part right quick because we're not doing a viewer request anymore. That was the other night. This is episode 044. Stop hammer time. Oh yeah, that'll make sense in a little bit. Always gotta have the weird puns if I can make them happen, right? So, yeah. So we are in a phase of history for the last several episodes and going into several more episodes in the future where we are talking about history from about 200 BC until about 1 BC. Elephants with hammers? Why not? We've had elephants with everything else, right? I don't know if everybody saw the elephant pirate that Vern posted in the Discord. That was delightful. Do the Hasmoneans wear parachute pants? I don't think so. They do have rather flowy tunic garments, though, so maybe that's the ancient version of parachute pants. Oh, good times. Yep. Okay, so yes, we are talking about the Hasmonean Dynasty tonight. And this is a group of people that are really fascinating, and most people just don't get lots of history about. Unfortunately, I end up having to skip basically all of them in World Civ class. They get a footnote in one discussion about the collapse of the Seleucid Empire. So it's unfortunate. I would love to teach more about them, and I get to tonight. And I get to share it with friends that are interested in this kind of stuff. So, hey, that's a bonus as well. A few announcements. I fully admit you had parachute pants in high school. I had some windsuits. I have tight rolled a blue jean or two. I have maybe even had stonewashed blue jean jackets. I can neither confirm nor deny oddly shaped neon colored sunglasses. I lived through the 80s, dadgummit. You just let me have that. You're just here for the puppy. Hey, Joey, what's up, man? Oh, the puppy. We would love to see pictures of Finn rocking the parachute pants. I will go... Oh, man, I don't know if I have any of my old school yearbooks or not. I bet my parents do, though. I bet my parents have tons of old, embarrassing pictures. Maybe that's something that I can do. Maybe if I go talk with my parents, I actually need to go to see my parents pretty soon, and spend some time with them. I haven't seen them in a long time. So we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, I was just thinking that maybe if I could get a giant stack of old Shane photos, that could be a point redemption. 80s brother in solidarity here. Woo! You weren't poppy enough to dress preppy. Like, oh yeah, I wasn't really either. I remember when I got my first windsuit, and it was the greatest thing ever. I remember my first blue jean jacket, and it was the greatest thing ever. I wore the devil out of that thing. I wore it until it fell apart. My parents didn't really care very much for rock and roll music, so I couldn't have any of the cool t-shirts that had band names on them. That wasn't really a thing that they supported very much. Which might be one of the reasons I learned how to play guitar and played loud music. You had some huge hair. Now, I won't share the photos, but I can confirm that the lovely Dr. McInnes, my beautiful and intelligent wife, had some pretty rockin' bangs back in the 80s. And we're talking about like the pile of bangs on the forehead and the teased up perm looking thing. 80s hairstyles for guys were somehow much less, I don't know, like out there. Not my choice. I wasn't trying to say it was. I know that your mom did your hair. So a couple of announcements. Announcement number one. I have decided that I should probably just be safe and go ahead and push the History of Middle-earth stream from potentially either this coming Saturday or Sunday to the following weekend. I have a paper that's due on Sunday night. I'm most of the way done with it, but it might be one of those things where I feel like I'm most of the way done with it, and then I'm really actually kind of not. So instead of saying I might do it on this coming Saturday, or I might do it on this coming Sunday, I think that we'll go ahead and schedule it for the following Saturday, which will be February the 27th. And I'll post that in Discord when we get done with the stream. So February 27th, History of Middle-earth Part 3. Be there or say that you love Morgoth. How many channel points to see the photos? See, I don't have any of them yet. I'd have to go... well, first I would have to text my mom and ask her to find them, and then I would have to go to visit my parents, which I will feel a little bit better about doing after about the middle of March. Next Friday, I have an appointment to get my first vaccination shot, and then I'll wait 3 or 4 weeks and get my second one. And while I know that doesn't mean that I won't necessarily be completely immune to passing it to my parents, they're also hopefully going to be in the process of getting some vaccinations as well, and that will make family gatherings of a small sort a little bit easier. So that's a whole other thing, though. Anyway, so History of Middle-earth 3, February 27th. Which is a Saturday. And we'll probably do it early again. It'll probably be in the middle of the day. Maybe something like noon or 1 o'clock my time, Central Standard Time. That has seemed to go okay. I might move it back to like 1 or 2 my time. I don't know. We'll see when we get there. I know that one of our regulars, Kelly, frequently streams on Saturday afternoons, and I feel bad about running into her streaming time, so we might do it a little bit earlier. or maybe do it where we overlap just a little bit so that we can drop a big raid on her, which would be fun. So there's announcement number one. Announcement number two, kind of going over some stuff that I mentioned on Tuesday. I have posted in the Discord a stream suggestions channel. So if you have any suggestions about stuff that you'd like to see, are there different types of things that I could do? Are there concepts that I could change, or there are things that I could do visually speaking? I know I need to spruce up the outlines and the stuff here. I am working on getting an overlay done, but it's a work in progress. We'll just say that. I don't need to get into all of that crazy stuff, but yeah, so that's something to think about, and I'm working on that. So hopefully that will be coming soon. It's not going to make, a huge amount of difference, but it'll be something nice for everybody. Other than that, no more stream announcements, but I do have a personal thing. And because I have an audience, and because I enjoy listening to myself talk, I would like to announce that tomorrow, the 19th of February, is 15 years to the day since Brittany and I went on our first date. So it is our 15-year date anniversary, and it has both been an incredible journey and not nearly enough. So I love you. I'm looking forward to eating a whole bunch of sushi tomorrow, and you're freaking awesome. So she's by far the smarter of us two. So we don't usually celebrate Valentine's Day because it's kind of just a thing. Yeah, if you're already there. Valentine's Day for us is an excuse to buy cheap candy because just 5 days later is our first date anniversary. So that's what we usually celebrate instead. So there's that. All right. So who's here for some history and not here to just listen to me ramble about personal stuff and stream news because, whatever. Heart. Anyway, so we're talking about the Hasmoneans. And again, this is a group that you may not have heard very much about or heard of at all. And that's okay, because they are a fairly important dynasty, but they're short-lived. They only hang around for a little bit more than 100 years, somewhere between 110, 120 years, depending on when you say they started and when you say that they ended. But in that period of time, they're going to play in a game with some of the really big power players. And because of their location, they're going to be in a strategic power spot. So first off, a very brief catch up for those of you that might not have been in past streams. And then, by the way, you don't have to be in all of the streams. I make them more or less self-contained. I do refer back to stuff if you've hung around before, and you can go catch the VODs if you want to catch back up on some of this stuff. So where we are in history, this 200 to 100 block of period of time, there are a lot of big empires, and these are the empires that are pretty much left over after Alexander the Great. And there are two really big ones right over here. One of them is here in Egypt, which is the Ptolemaic Egyptian Empire, which we'll be talking about in a stream in just a few weeks. But the really big one over here is this thing called the Seleucid Empire, which was really, really powerful, but by around the middle part of the 100s AD, they had really started falling apart. And they had lost almost all of their land, and they were really only left with this little chunk. But that means that all of this other territory that they had access to was sort of up for grabs. And that's going to allow a lot of other kind of new players to enter the game, right? So we had the Greco-Bactrians, and we have the Parthians, and we have the people over here in Armenia that we've talked about a little bit. We have some people over here in Pontus that we'll talk about next week. But this region right here is what's referred to in history as the Levant. It's modern day Egypt and Lebanon and Jordan. And this region is really strategically important for a few reasons. Number one, if you want to move on land from Asia to Africa, you have to go through this area. This region right here is really rugged. It's high elevation, very, very hot, very arid, and not very much water. You are not going to march an army through this region right here. So what people usually did in the ancient world was that they came up Mesopotamia, which is right here between the Tigris, Euphrates rivers, and then they came down through here. And that means that whomever controls this region is sort of capable of acting like a gatekeeper. Who can control that little strip of land right there is the people that can shut down north-south trade. And there are also a lot of big port cities in that area that are really important for sea travel. So if you're moving around the Mediterranean, most of the ships that were doing trade did not really cut across the open Mediterranean. The weather patterns on the Mediterranean are sort of sketchy, and during parts of the year, you just didn't want to sail around that stuff across the open water, so you would sail around the coastline. And you would make stops along the way, kind of hop down port cities along the coast. But if you held this region, you have a whole stretch of these port cities. And this is going to mean that you have the ability to kind of shut stuff down if you want to. And the people that live in this area are the Jewish people. This is where Jerusalem is. Jerusalem is right about here. We can zoom in a little bit and get some better perspective. And you know what? I'll even turn on the modern borders and we can look at where things are in modern day. So our modern day countries are the country of Jordan. This is Israel. This part of the Sinai Peninsula is part of Egypt and the country of Lebanon. So you can see Jerusalem here. This region is pretty geographically important, and it's very strategically important. So whomever controls this area has some power to flex a little bit. But you have to have it really securely locked down. And this region had been argued over between the Ptolemies down here in Egypt and the Seleucids over here in Syria since basically Alexander the Great. And the Seleucids end up taking this region under a guy named Antiochus IV, who is this guy. This is Antiochus IV, who is the emperor of the Seleucid Empire. And if you'll remember, or if you weren't around, he preferred to call himself Epiphanes. Which means God manifest, because he had a very high opinion of himself and believed himself to be worthy of praise and a god. Now, there are going to be some people in this Levantine region in, what we would call our Jewish Holy Land here that don't really care for him very much. And they sort of give him the nickname Epimanes, which does not mean God manifest. It means madman. Because we're not worshiping you. We have our one God. We're not down with you. You're crazy. Man, you really need to learn how to use CST. What's up, Arturgo? Autumn, welcome, my friend. So, yeah. Don't we all, though? Anyway, so when we talk about this relationship between a foreign ruler of the Seleucids who thinks that he's a god and the Jewish people who only have one god, you can tell how this is going to have some tension. And these guys don't get along. Antiochus IV was not so great of a ruler. Just as kind of a footnote in history, he was a jerk. And he's dead, so, I mean, he's not going to mind me calling him that. But he starts doing this whole thing about how he's really going to crack down on this, you really do need to worship me like a god thing. And the Jewish people really resist this. And they go, you are not God. There is only one God, and he's not you. And we've got our temple here, and you're not going to do anything. No, this is not going to happen. So what Antiochus decides to do is basically outlaw Judaism. So how do you do that? Well, you basically make it illegal to do all of the things that the Jewish people did. Number one, you can't circumcise boys anymore. Of course, one of the marks of being Jewish is circumcision. This was a sign of a covenant between one of the patriarchs of Judaism, Abraham, and God. And Antiochus, who was very much Greek, thought that this was mutilation, and they go, nope, you can't do that anymore. So how then do the Jewish people mark their sons for being inside of the covenant? Well, that was hard. Number two, you can't own Torah scrolls. And the Torah is the book of the law. It's actually several books. But these were the central teachings of the Jewish faith. And you could not possess them or read from them. And if you got caught with them, you were in trouble. And number three, you can't practice on the Sabbath day. Of course, the Jewish people believe in a day of rest at the end of the week where you go to religious ceremonies and you do stuff. Holy moil! Well done, Vern. I wholeheartedly appreciate that one. So you can't do any of the things that make Jewish people Jewish. And guess what? They do it anyway. And they kind of thumb their nose at the emperor and go, you can't get rid of us. We're not going to just bow down and worship you. It ain't going to work that way. And so Antiochus decides that he's going to get petty and extra. And how do you do that? Well, the Jewish people only had one temple. And I'll show you a reconstruction of it. It looked something like this. We don't actually know 100% completely what it looked like because we only have literary descriptions, and by the time we started doing archaeology, there was another building on top of this building, which is now called the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim mosque. But based on our ancient sources, this is something that we can feel pretty comfortable that it looks like. So this is the Jewish temple reconstructed, more or less, with an asterisk beside it, if you will. And so Antiochus decides, they've only got one temple, I'll wreck their temple. So how is he going to do this? With probably one of the worst ways possible. So Antiochus decides that he's going to get a pig, which we should remember, or if you do not know, Jewish people believe that pigs are unclean animals. They are not to be touched or eaten. And Antiochus gets a big old fat pig and takes it into the Jewish temple and sacrifices this pig on the Jewish altar. And he sacrifices it to the Greek gods. And then takes the blood of the pig and kind of goes Jackson Pollock all over the temple walls. That's a jerk move. Oh yeah, yet another reason I am a horrible Jew. You love that pulled pork? I'm a big fan of pulled pork as well. I am not Jewish by heritage, but I do love me some pulled pork. So Antiochus wrecks the temple. And this is super horrible. Hey, Cassidy. Oh, okay. So we've got a lot of people here. We need to do some shout outs. We need to shout out Cassidy. Go follow Cassidy, who is an oil painter. Autumn, if you don't know Cassidy, I think you would get along. Cassidy, if you don't know AR Turkel here, Autumn, I think you should go hang out in his channel because I think you two would get along. We also have the Incredible Hunk Live hanging out in the chat. If my bot would catch up, do the shout out bot. Do the shout out. Do it. Do I have to do it again? Sometimes if I shout out too fast, it gets like... and it doesn't like it. There we go. Have I missed anyone? Anyone here that streams that I've missed? I think I got everybody. Okay, so everybody go follow everybody. And spread the love. So, wrecks the temple. Things are bad news. Now, the Jewish people have a ceremony that they could conduct to cleanse the temple. However, Antiochus, being a gigantic jerk, basically shuts the door and puts it under guard, and they can't go inside to the temple to clean it up. So how do the Jewish people react to this? Do they get happy? Do they celebrate Antiochus? Do they go, oh, hey, you actually are, a really cool guy, and after you sacrificed that pig on our altar and killed every hope that we could of fixing our temple, we're totally going to be your friends now? Oh, of course not. They're going to get really hacked off and start trying to kill people. Hey, Mamba, what's up? Welcome, welcome. So they basically step up the level of discontent. And the response from Antiochus is, all right, fine. If you're still going to try to do stuff, even without your temple and with all these laws in place, I'm going to tax you to death. And so he jacks the taxes up on the Jewish territory. This was also, and he doesn't really say this, but on the sly, he's doing this because his empire owns a giant chunk of money to Rome, who had just kicked their booties. So he had to pay tribute to Rome, and he didn't have the cash. So he was taxing these people, and he was telling them, because you're a jerk, but it served dual purpose here. And he's also going to basically make all of these laws under penalty of death. So if you get caught with a Torah, you're dead. Well, actually, not completely dead. You get either killed or they disfigure you. And if you are especially a Jewish priest... it was a pig. You heard ritual sacrifice, but it was a pig instead of a goat. Yeah. So, not all rituals use goats. Some rituals use goats. I do like goat, too. It's very tasty. Goats, good stuff. Goat and curry, I like me some goat curry. Anyway, I'm talking about food. This is something that you can very easily sidetrack me on. I do like me some food. Anyway... So if you are a Jewish priest, you are supposed to be basically a perfect specimen of a human. Now, I'm not talking about like your body mass index is perfect and you never have bad days, but you are not supposed to have any sort of deformities, or you're not supposed to be missing limbs or anything like that. So if the Seleucids, or Antiochus's people, found a priest doing some priestly work on the sly, they would chop part of them off, which would make them sort of ritually unclean and therefore unable to conduct their priestly duties. If you were a regular person, you just got killed. So enter a guy named Mattathias. Mattathias. Now, Mattathias was a Jewish priest. Cassidy's over here cooking pasta. You prefer goat over pork? Nothing wrong with that. We also don't get the chance to eat goat because it's so expensive. We have a local butcher back... Oh, sad face. Back when we used to have a very thriving farmer's market here in my city. There's a guy that sells, raises and sells... like antibiotic free range goat and sheep, and man, that's the stuff. We used to also get eggs from him. His eggs were legit. Nope. The eggs were from another guy at the farmer's market. Anyway, our farmer's market no longer exists because of COVID. Who's Mattathias? Mattathias is a guy, and he was a priest, and he lived in a little city called Modin. Which is not in Jerusalem. It's a little bit away from Jerusalem. But he's one of these guys that had sort of been very quietly and very secretly on the sly, still doing some priestly duties. because the priests of the Jewish people felt compelled to do this. This was their calling. If they're in a certain family line and if they're in a certain job, that is their job, to take care of the religious needs of their people. And Mattathias gets caught. And the soldiers that catch him give him an option. He can make a sacrifice to Zeus, or they're going to kill him. Mattathias does not take very kindly to that, and seizing a weapon, manages to kill the Seleucid guards. And this is kind of a moment. This is like the little pebble that kind of falls from the top of the mountain and then hits something else, and then at the bottom you end up with an avalanche, because stuff's about to get real. Having a turkey and cheese sandwich because the deli is halal. There you go, Vern. And welcome, Vern. So, yeah, Mattathias kills some Seleucid officials. And then he's like, oh, crud. And so he bugs out to the Judean wilderness. And there's some rugged places in Israel. There's some mountainous regions that are really hard to get into. And so he runs off into the wilderness and he puts out the call. So this is like calling the Avengers or calling the news team together if we're an anchorman. He calls for a revolt. And this is what we're going to know as the Maccabean Revolt. And it runs from about 167 to about 160. I rebuke you! Bugs out to the Judean wilderness is a phrase I'm going to try to work in a future conversation. Oh man, we haven't seen you in forever. Mac, where are you? Man, I bugged out to the Judean wilderness. Maccabean. I'll take 10. Maccabees! Okay, so I've actually got to pause here and tell a bit of a funny story. Back when, I don't know if you all know this or not, but KP and I went to college together. He's 1 year ahead of me in school. It is not soup related, no. So we went to the same college, and KP was taking it's a Jewish coffee shop. I totally drink coffee from there. So KP was taking an Old Testament class. It's the, sort of a scholarly approach to studying the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. And the gentleman teaching the class was lovingly known as Old Man Noonkester. And this is because there were two Dr. Noonkesters at our college. There was Old Man Noonkester and Young Man Noonkester. And one was the father of the other. You know how this goes. Old man. Old man? Not that old. It was New Testament. Okay, sorry. Sounds like it needs to be taught in an Acropolis. It kind of was. It was taught in one of the older buildings on the campus. And if you had transported J. Ralph Noonkester back in time, he would have totally been a good Greek philosopher. Old man. Now that's what I call a Bible study. So anyway, we actually had a class at the same time, right across the hall from each other. I was in a class studying Greco-Roman culture, and KP was in a class studying New Testament. I apologize, I thought it was Old Testament. And according to KP's version of the story, during the lesson where Dr. Noonkester got to talking about the Maccabean Revolt, he just got very, very animated. And he was a short man. He's probably 5'5", 5'6", very thin, but could get rather animated. And I know that he was shouting Maccabees because I heard it across the hall in my classroom. So when KP drops in and yells, Maccabees, I know what he's talking about. Anyway, that young times and better, not better days, just different days when I still had a twinkle in my eye and I thought that the world was my oyster. Anyway, now I know that the world is my burrito, and if you get too much of it, it just gives you a stomach ache. All right. So, the Maccabean revolt. Mattathias is going to call together the Jewish armed forces. You started that college 20 years ago this August. Sadness. You still have a twinkle in your eye? Yeah, I know. Was he allergic? He was not allergic to the Maccabees. That was more of an innocence. I was much more oblivious to the reality of the world. I'm still excited about stuff. Now I just know how it all works, which is both more fun and more horrifying. It's like you don't know how the sausage is made, and then when you figure it out, you're like, I'm still going to eat the sausage. I mean, I like sausage. Why not? Duh. Anyway, so Mattathias has a whole bunch of sons, and we'll talk about the sons. There's a Judah and a Simon and a Jonathan, all really good Jewish names. And they're all good Jewish men, and they're all going to help out. And I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. Thank you, KP. Much appreciated, my friend. Paid no attention to the man behind the curtain. Yeah, so Mattathias gets some support. And the Jewish people are going to enter open rebellion. And the Seleucids are like, yeah, those Jewish people are rebelling. Send a detachment down. So the Seleucids, in response to what they think is like some minor rebellion where some Jewish people have some weapons, send this basically small detachment of soldiers down. And the Jewish people wipe the floor with them. And it's pretty funny because nobody really expected this. The Seleucid Empire at that point was still fairly powerful, and these people were basically starting a civil war. But the Seleucids get real freaked out then. They're like, oh, what now? The Jewish people beat us? No, that's not supposed to be the way that it works. To be fair, Judas didn't really expect it either. Well, I mean, don't spoil the story. Yeah, I mean, they didn't really think that they were going to win. I'm revolting? Question mark. So this is a pretty big deal. And around this time, somehow, we don't know exactly when or exactly how, it seems that Mattathias died. We don't think that it was by foul means or in battle or anything like that, because it would have almost certainly have been recorded in the histories. We feel like it was probably just that he was already fairly advanced in age and just died. So his son, Judah, takes over. And Judah is going to be the guy that kind of runs the show here. And the Seleucids are not going to be happy just sitting on this first defeat, and they send more troops. You mean there's a chance he could still be alive? I mean, he might be frozen in carbonite, but at this point he might be freezer burned. So I don't know. He probably just died from natural causes. We do know that he is dead, though. I joked about the carbonite because I'm a nerd and I've got to try to sneak nerd stuff in wherever I can, because we have this thing. This is actually Mattathias's tomb, and it is in Israel today, and you can still go see it. Unfortunately, it has been the target, as you can see, of some graffiti. I shouldn't have to mention the fact that there is a lot of religious and ethnic tension in Israel, and unfortunately, historical sites like this are frequent targets of vandalism. But I feel like everybody's pretty aware of stuff like that happening. But this is Mattathias' tomb. So we do know that he died, and we do know where he was buried. But Judah's going to take over. So this guy, what's he going to do? Well, first off, he's going to fight off a second force of Seleucids. And after they win this sort of second battle, he's going to start trying to turn on the propaganda machine. Wait, Shane, don't spook me like that. We're on our way to History of Middle-earth Part 3, right? Not 4. No, Arcadian, we're on our way towards 4. And welcome. Yeah, we're doing History of Middle-earth Part 3 next Saturday. It's the 27th. No, we haven't done it yet. We're building towards 4. We have not done it yet. Yeah, 3 was triggered when we hit 400 followers. So yeah, we're going to do History of Middle-earth Part 3 on the 27th, which is not day after tomorrow, but the next Saturday. So yeah, calm down. Okay, so Judah starts getting some folks behind him, and the people are getting kind of excited about this, and the rebellion's gaining some steam. And this is where the Maccabean stuff is going to come about, because Judah becomes known as Judah Maccabee, which means the hammer. Maccabeus, the hammer. He's Judah the hammer. Stop. Hammer time. Doom, 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 doom. Yep, see, I told you I'd bring it back around. So he's Judah the hammer because he is beating the junk out of the Seleucids like a hammer. That's a cool nickname. If I had a nickname, the hammer has to be pretty high up there. Anyway, Captain Hammer. Is that kind of like Captain Planet? He's smashing the Seleucids? He was. So what you going to do? Well, if you've got a building of momentum behind you and you've got soldiers kind of swelling your ranks, you set your sights on something important. And Judah decides in 164 BC that it's time to go take Jerusalem back. And they do. And so they take back Jerusalem from the Seleucids and they gain access to the temple again. And this is a really important moment in Jewish history because there's some stuff going on here. They want to go purify the temple, but because they were in a wartime scenario and because supplies were tight, the priests that were with them go to the temple and they say, look, here's the deal. We have this ceremony that we can do to purify the temple and clean it and make it clean again. But we have to light these candles and we have to light these lamps and they have to burn the whole time for like days, like 7 or 8 days. And Judah's like, okay, so go do it. And they're like, we don't have enough oil. We only have enough for like maybe 1 or 2 nights. And Judah's like, well, you know what? Here's the thing. God's going to provide. So you go start doing the ceremony and God will provide what we need. So they start doing the ceremony and the oil keeps burning. It runs and it runs and it runs and it runs and it goes all the way through all of the nights that it needed to go through. And if you've ever seen one of these, you'll know that this is the Jewish menorah, which is 7 branches of candlestick or candelabra. And they were supposed to light one of these every night. And the oil miraculously made it through. And this is a pretty big deal because this means that the temple could be used again. And if you're familiar with Jewish ceremony or Jewish holidays, or if you've ever been around Adam Sandler, you'll know what Hanukkah is. This is the origin of Hanukkah. So in Hanukkah, you light 1 candle per night, and this is symbolic of the oil lasting and the purification of the temple during the period of time when it was retaken. 8 crazy nights. I tried really, really hard to try to find a way to pun some of the lyrics of that song into the title for tonight, and it just didn't work. And all I ended up with something like Judah the Hammer lights the menorah, but it was going to be like Judah the Hammer lights the menorah, but you can't really get cadence down in a title, so that would have been like a double level goofy pun, because then you have like the Hanukkah song with the Hanukkah pun, and anyway, I tried. It just didn't work out. Not every great stream idea works. So this is the origin of Hanukkah, and the Jewish people have retaken their homeland, and they've retaken the temple, and they've got their capital back, and now they've got to sort of move back towards some sort of normalcy. And this is where there's going to start being an internal issue with the revolt and with the Jewish state, because according to Jewish scripture, to be the high priest of the Jewish people, you had to be from a particular family. You had to be of the lineage of a guy named Zadok. And there were some different candidates that were kind of out there. And politics gets involved. So there are a couple of different sort of parties inside of the Jewish faith, and you might be familiar with some of these. One of them is the Pharisees. Zoltan! Hail Zoltan! One of them is the Pharisees, and one of them is the Sadducees. Zazu! Pouncing. Anyway, so the Sadducees were a leadership kind of social party that ran the temple. And they were very, very strict on proper following the law according to the letter of the written law. And there were the Pharisees, who were sort of like a legalistic group that were a little bit more political minded, that sort of tried to push the boundaries with this new thing that was called the oral law, which was added during the period of exile. And the Sadducees and the Pharisees don't really get along. And when it's time to pick a new high priest, this starts getting really, really antagonistic, because both parties sort of have candidates that are going to be their favorites. Kneel before Zod. All of these things work, yes. You are not from the line of Zod. We all know that Krypton was destroyed. Anyway, so they find a high priest, and the temple opens back up and it starts working, but there are some hurt feelings here. And the war is going to sort of shift around this period of time, because Epiphanes, old Antiochus IV, crazy man, kicks the bucket. And when he dies, there's a big struggle inside the Seleucid Empire as to who's going to actually take over. And some of the generals of the Seleucid Empire are going to take over, trying to put down these Jewish revolts. And it's not really going to work out so well. And this is when a new player has entered the game. And this new player is the Romans. Because when the Seleucids go down fighting amongst themselves, the Romans are going to be like, it's free real estate. And so the Romans send some people over into Judea. And they go, hey, if you guys are looking for overlords, check us out. And Judah beats the crap out of them. It's like, get you. Nope. Yeah. So he's getting big in his britches. And this is kind of a bad thing, because he kind of gets a little bit big for the toga. And there's a big, unfortunate battle called the Battle of Elasa. And this is in 162 BC. No, it's in 161, sorry. Battle of Elasa. Yeah. The Romans are going to send more people. Because here's the thing about Rome. Beat them once, shame on Rome. Beat them twice, we're going to kill you. That's kind of the Roman, idea. They're not going to play. They are going to send more troops. And at Elasa, the Romans are going to catch Judah and a whole group of the Jewish fighting men and they're going to get beaten, and Judah is going to get killed in battle. And this is a kind of a pivotal moment, because at that point, the Jewish people are going to have to make a decision. Are we going to keep fighting, or are we going to bow down and stay with Rome? And the answer was, we're going to keep fighting. And they do. So by the time that Judah died, he had managed to put together a fairly, well, this is what his territory looked like. So this is the Dead Sea. This is the Dead Sea. This is the Jordan River. He had the city of Jericho. He had the capital of Jerusalem, and just a little bit of territory around it. So at this point, you probably could not really call this anything more than a kingdom. And even then, it was not necessarily a very big kingdom. If we were to use our fun little tools over here in Google Earth and sort of approximate how much territory he had, if we go over here and we use our handy dandy ruler and we kind of draw a line out here, and I could tell you that he had, at the widest part of his territory, maybe 50 miles wide of territory, which is not so great, but it's more than the Jewish people had before he was in charge. So who's going to take over next? Who's the next Hasmonean? Well, the next Hasmonean is his brother Jonathan. And Jonathan's going to take over, and they're going to keep right on going, but they're going to be a little bit smarter about things this time. So instead of engaging either the Seleucids or the Romans directly head on, they're going to switch to guerrilla tactics. And this is what's going to really sort of drain the Romans dry. Because if you'll remember from a previous episode, or if you weren't around, Rome was fighting a ton of wars at this period, and they really didn't have just gaboodles of troops to throw around. And the Romans were getting really sick of having to supply armies all the way over in enemy territory, especially when the Seleucids, one of their big enemies, was right next door. So in 161, Jonathan is going to craft a treaty with Rome, whereby Rome recognized the Hasmonean dynasty as a separate country. That's a big deal, because now that means all of the other countries have to make a decision. Do they make treaties with this new country? Do they recognize this new country as well? If Rome is going to recognize them, does that mean Rome gets kind of, unilateral trade agreements? All of these questions have to be answered. And the Seleucids get real hot about this because, they still claim the territory as their own. But they're fighting against the Romans too, and Rome really doesn't care what they think. So, Jonathan, what does he do? Well, Jonathan is going to be a little bit of a statesman. He sort of fancies himself as this international wheeler and dealer. Because, hey, he got this treaty built, right? He's the one that got Jewish people recognized as a country, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. That was a big deal. But he's playing out of his league here. And he starts meddling in politics between the Seleucids and the Romans and the Macedonians and people from Pergamum. And he's drawing a lot of attention. And when you're starting to draw a lot of attention, it can be good attention or it can be bad attention. And Jonathan's not necessarily also just happy with being sort of king of the Hasmonean dynasty. He also really wants to be high priest. And there's a bit of a problem with that because he's not technically from the right family, but he's kind of like cousin, third time removed on one side, halfway related. And the people don't really like this, but he takes over as high priest too. Wait, that was you? I love the callback. Yeah, so now he's king, but he's also high priest. And people are like, I don't think you're supposed to do both of those, are you? And some people are like, no. And the Sadducees are like, no. And the Pharisees are like, are you going to support us? And Jonathan's like, I'm kind of ambivalent. And the Pharisees are like, okay. Yeah, and your kings aren't supposed to be both. Yeah, you're supposed to be one or the other. And Jonathan's like, but I'm the man. I'm going to heal the wounds of our country and bring everybody together. Not so much. So the leader of the Seleucids at this time, things had calmed down up there a little bit. And the Seleucid emperor decides that he's going to make an overture. He's going to say, Jonathan, leader of the Hasmoneans, come and meet me, and we will make a treaty with each other. And people are like, dude, you shouldn't go do that. He's going to totally catch you and then kill you. And Jonathan's like, dude. So he goes, and he shows up at the designated meeting place, and it turns out, guess what? The Seleucids caught him, and they put him in prison. Kind of could have seen that one coming. Maybe. Yeah. So what you gonna do? Well, now the younger brother, Simon, has to decide, am I the king now? Or what? I don't know. I mean, maybe? Anyway. So the Seleucids go, Simon, new ruler of the Jewish people. We got your brother. Don't tase me, bro. Yeah. Don't ransom me back to my family, bro. But that's what happens. They go, look, here's the deal, Simon. We got your brother, and he's your king, and he's your high priest. So you got to pay us a lot of money. And remember, the Seleucids are broke, and they could use the money. And they're like, do we pay the ransom? And the people inside of the sort of advisor group of Simon go, dude, you just write your brother off. Let's just go have a funeral because he's dead. Don't pay them money. They're never going to give him back. There's 0% chance you're going to get your brother back. And Simon's like, no, I don't know. I mean, they said they'd do it. Let's get the ransom together. Let's just get the ransom together. We'll give them the ransom, and then they'll give us our brother back, and everything will go back to fine. So they pay the ransom, and guess what happens? The Seleucids take the money and kill Jonathan. Bloop. 143. Jonathan's dead. Yeah, they also said they wouldn't kidnap him in the first place. So when Jonathan was alive, he did manage to do some stuff. He increased the territory. So he's added the region over here of Perea, which is in modern day Jordan. He's expanded the Jewish territory out this way and out this way. So moving on up. But then he broke out and traveled across the country with a mercenary, learning how to become a killer the entire way. And he teamed up with Charlize Theron, who plays Andromachus of Andromache of Syria in the Old Guard, and they go kill the bad guys and set the world to right because they're immortal, right? Right? There could be only one. Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. All right. So Jonathan did expand the territory. He did make some moves here. He was moving things bigger and making things happen and shaking stuff up, but now he's dead. Yeah. And here's Simon. So Simon's the kind of the new guy, and he's the young buck, and he's like, okay, now it's time to do some stuff, and we're gonna get back at those Seleucids. That really happened. Heard it here. And I never lie or exaggerate the truth. I never bring in weird pop cultural references and mush it up with history just to be fun. Right? Everything that I say is the goodness to gracious truth. No, you should never believe a word that I say. And if you don't think that any of this is accurate, you're welcome to call me out on it. I have no problem defending what I'm doing here. But you should show the correct and healthy amount of skepticism and understand that this is sort of an introductory level material that you can go study a lot more on if you so inclined. So, Simon, what you gonna do? Well, Simon's gonna get back at those mean old Seleucids. So around this time, there's a civil war in the Seleucid Empire again. And Simon's like, who's fighting against that guy that killed my brother? And they're like, that guy. And he's like, that's our friend now. Go help that guy. So in exchange for helping a rival emperor take the throne of the Seleucid Empire, Simon gets the Seleucid Empire to officially recognize that the Jews are independent. Now, let's not get too excited about that, because Rome had already recognized that the Jews were independent, and under Jonathan, they had already made some international treaties with other foreign powers that recognized that Jews were independent. But this is sort of the next door neighbor, building a nice fence between you and your angry next door neighbor that keeps letting his dog come over and poop on your yard. This is a healthy thing. Good fences make good neighbors, good boundaries and stuff like that. Right. So Simon gets the nice fence here built up, and he's going to take over as king. And he's also going to do that thing where he also takes over as high priest. And people are like, dude, you really, really can't do that. You really got to not do the high priest / king thing. And Simon's like, but why not? And they're like, family lineage and politics, and you don't fit the mold, and no. Simon also did some expansion during this period of time. They took a port city. They took a big port city called Joppa, which was going to be really important because this was going to become the sort of launching off point from the Jewish fleet. And like Tuesday night, we discussed Jewish piracy along the coast of the Levantine region, and that's during this period of time. So Jewish people now controlled an entire sort of block of territory right across this way. So you had to walk through their stuff. And they had a port city, and they're patrolling all of this water. So if you're floating by, you got to float by their water. So they're becoming bigger players in the game. And this is where we're rolling towards. Here's the thing, though. At this point, Simon is in a little bit of a pickle because they've got the people of here in the Seleucids kind of happy, but there's another group. And these other groups are the Ptolemies down here in Egypt. And the Ptolemies used to control this territory before the Seleucids took it from them, and the Ptolemies would like to have it back. And they also really don't like this whole piracy thing. And Simon sort of stands up to the Ptolemies, and they're like, we're independent, and you stay down there in Egypt, and we'll do our thing up here. Joppa the Hut? Joppa the Hub. Well played. It's Joppa. Like that. but I like that. Look at what happened to the last guy. So what to do with Simon? Well, the Ptolemies want to get rid of this guy because he's causing trouble for them. And so the Ptolemies find some people inside of the Jewish territory that don't like Simon. And here's the thing, it's not so hard to find, because this whole king / high priest thing is just not working out. And they bribe these people to go assassinate Simon, which happens. And then the Ptolemies immediately go, but we like your kid. Your kid, put his kid in charge. So Simon gets killed in 135, and his son John Hyrcanus takes over. Now, John Hyrcanus is a different kind of guy. But before we go there, let's look at Simon's addition. Boop. Now, it might not look like much, but connecting the dots here and making a united Judean front between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean and gaining access to the Mediterranean, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Those Hyrcanians, they're so hot right now. Indeed. John Hyrcanus. Such a great name. The Hyrcanus, though, is interesting because you're like, that doesn't sound very Jewish. And it's not. It's actually kind of Greek. And this is going to be an important thought moment here for us. Let us remember that surrounding all of the Jewish people, regardless of how many different people did not like them, the people around them are all very much Hellenistic. And these are people that gained access to the Greek culture because of Alexander the Great, and the Antiochenes, all the people up that were Antiochus, the whatever. The people in the Seleucid Empire are really big on the Greeks. The Ptolemies are really big on the Greeks. You mean the Judean United People's Front? Whatever happened to the Liberation Front of Judea? Oh, you mean him? He's over there. Hello! What have the Romans ever done for us? I love how much that happens. I'm going to have to play some of that movie eventually. Anyway, so Hyrcanus. He's got a lot of Greek influence pushing on him. And remember that. So Hyrcanus decides, I'm not going to follow the same issues that my dad followed. So when his dad gets killed, he takes over as king and high priest, but like right out the gate, he goes, here's what's going to happen now. I'm going to not hold on to this. I'm going to try to fix things right now because we just had an assassination. Things are still kind of crazy. There's still enemies all the way around us. And when I die, I'm going to make one of my sons king, and I'm going to make one of my sons high priest. And this doesn't completely make everybody happy because of the whole bloodline thing, but this makes people more happy than both of them being one person. So Hyrcanus gets a little bit of a break because he's going to, he kind of makes it known that he's going to try to fix this. But still, people don't still think that he's they don't really buy his Jewishness. They're like, where are your credentials? What's your background in Jewishness? Like, were you a priest? He's like, not really. So he has a bit of a chip on his shoulder. And he doesn't like the fact that people are not being very supportive of his Jewishness. And he doesn't like the fact that people are calling him a Greek. And he's like, okay, how do I prove that I'm a good Jewish person? What can I do to prove that I am a good Jewish person? How about conquering a bunch of people and forcing them to become Jewish people? And it just so turned out that there was a small group of people just across the Jordan River called Idumeans from Idumea. And so he decides to go conquer them, and he conquers the Idumeans, and then he forces them to convert. And you go, what does that mean? Well, he takes all of the men that are above, born age, and he force circumcises all of them. And he's like, you're all now Jewish. And they're like, I don't want to be Jewish. That was a bad joke, sorry. Poor taste. Well, you're Jewish now. And people are like, oh, okay. I mean, that's something that a Jewish person might do, but you're still looking really, really Greek. And we really don't like the Greek influence that you have in your family. So you're gaining more points with the right people, but we're not down with this yet. And he's like, okay. What if I wrecked Samaria? And you're like, okay, what does that mean? So this gets pretty deep into the Jewish history, but when the northern kingdom of Israel fell apart thanks to the Assyrians deported some of them, but also brought other people into the region and repopulated people just north of Jerusalem. And those people kind of still claimed that they were Jewish. They had mixed Jewish heritage, and they had their own temple. This temple at a place called Shechem. And they were like, we're actually still Jewish. And the Jewish people that were, in Jerusalem were like, no, dude, no, you're not. No, you're totally not actually Jewish. You are kind of half Jewish, maybe. And so he goes, what if I go blow up their temple? Yes, this is the plan. So Hyrcanus invades Samaria, and he destroys the Samaritan temple, and then says, you are all now Jewish, because I say so. And now the people are like, okay. I mean, this dude's doing a lot of stuff that a good Jewish ruler would do. I mean, he's getting he's getting the golf clap in the corner. And so when Hyrcanus does reach the end of his life, and he's going to rule from 134 to 104, and he makes it very clear, again, we're going to fix this. One of my sons is going to be the king, and one of my sons is going to be the high priest. We're going to fix this. And when Hyrcanus dies, the Jewish people were like, now that was a proper Jewish leader. And he expanded a lot. He didn't just take Samaria and Judea. He also took a whole bunch of Samaria and Idumea. He also took some more territory over on the other side. So this guy's adding all sorts of stuff here. So we've got the region of Samaria that's conquered. This big region up here, you can see Shechem, where the temple was. He's adding a whole bunch of territory over here in what is modern-day Jordan, including the city of Madaba, which I've been to. It's very pretty. And all of these Idumeans down here added to the territory. Now that is some sizable advances. They don't get a good reputation, the Samaritans. Well, not until that one guy. Okay, so now that you bring up the Good Samaritan, and this has very little to do with the actual lesson for tonight or the conversation for tonight. But the whole conversation here about the Good Samaritan, the story goes, if you're not familiar, there's a guy lying in a ditch and he was half dead. And a Levite walked by who was a guy that was like a temple helper for the Jewish people, and looked at the guy and was like, nope. And then a priest walked by and looked at the dude and was like, nope. And then a Samaritan walked by and saw the guy and helped him. So the way that most people interpret the story is that two people that should have helped him walked right by him. But here's the thing that comes from a misunderstanding of Jewish temple law. If you went into the temple and did any duties that were temple or religious based, you had to be ceremonially clean, which means that you could not touch dead bodies. If you touched a dead body, you were ceremonially unclean, and you could not perform any of your duties until you went through a purification ritual. So when the Levite walked over and saw a dead body, he was like, oh, I can't touch that. And when the priest walked by and was like, oh, I can't touch that. So that's that whole thing. Now, when the Samaritan walked by, this was supposed to be the third person that they were like, there ain't no way that guy's going to look. And then he did, and it was like, oh. We're not doing Bible drill, KP. Back down, bud. So basically, this isn't two people that should have stopped and one people that didn't. It was three people that would never going to stop, and the guy that should not have stopped the most is the one that did. So why does everybody talk about the Good Samaritan? What about the bad Samaritans? I think this is giving unrealistic expectations for the Samaritans. Right, yeah. So the idea here is that the Samaritans were not really well liked by the Jewish people, period. So this would have been like saying the good member of Al-Qaeda, and Americans would be like, ain't nobody from Al-Qaeda going to help an American on this to have dead on the side of the road. But then they did. Can't touch this. Yeah, so the guy that was the least likely to stop is the one that stopped. And that's the actual lesson of the parable. So anyway, Hasmoneans. John Hyrcanus dies. Crazy stuff happens. He leaves one of his sons, Hyrcanus II. I'm sorry, I'm getting all of this messed up. He leaves one of his sons as high priest, a guy named Aristobulus. And he leaves another one of his sons as king, and he leaves his wife as regent for the king. But that doesn't work so well, because the guy that was the high priest wanted to be the high priest and the king, and his name was Aristobulus. And Aristobulus is going to get all antsy, and he decides to put his brother, whose name is Alexander, which you're like, Alexander? That sounds really, really not Jewish. Yeah, and it wasn't. It wasn't Jewish. Yeah, there's a T in there. Aristobulus. Typo. I tried to type and talk at the same time, and I can barely do one at a time, So Aristobulus puts his brother, Alexander, and his mother in jail. And he takes over as both. And he's like, now I'm both. Boom, I'm king and I'm high priest. And ain't nobody do nothing for me. And people get really upset at this guy. And they get really, really upset at this guy. And the problem is that they can't really do too terribly much about it because he's basically the king and the high priest. So how you gonna get rid of this guy, right? Question mark? Question mark? Yeah. So here's the thing. His mom and his brother are still in prison. And Aristobulus is kind of like making it known that if people don't do what he says, he's probably going to start torturing them. And that's kind of a rough thing, because, I mean, yeah, that's just a mess. Yeah, here we go killing again. Aristobulus sounds kind of Greek. Alexander sounds really Greek. I'm Aristofabulous. I'm outlined here in the newest Judean fashion. I don't know where I was going with that, but sure, why not? Yeah, so I might kill my brother and I might kill my mom. And he really thinks that he's going to do this. And he's like, I think I'm actually going to have him killed. And so he sends somebody to go kill his mother and his brother. And while the guy's going to kill his mother and his brother, he's like, that's a bad idea. And like he has to run down the executioner like, no, don't kill my mom and my brother. And then he gets really sick. And some of the people say like he was so deeply in regret for the thought that he was going to kill his mother and his brother that he wasted away. And other people were like, that's the wrath of God. Like you don't do that. That was God going. Or was he poisoned? Well, he might have been poisoned, because here's the thing. The Pharisees hated this guy because he was a jerk. So Aristobulus doesn't rule that long, and he ends up dying in 103, and his brother takes over, who is Alexander Jannaeus. Now you go, that sounds a lot like a Greek thing, like Alexander and Jannaeus. That's all sorts of Greek. Yeah, it kind of is Greek. And here's where some crazy stuff starts going down. So there's a tradition within the Jewish scripture where if your brother dies, you should marry his wife and take his children into your family. So Alexander Jannaeus marries his brother who tried to kill him. He marries his wife. And he does this to legitimize his claim over both kingship and the high priest. And again, we're in that whole like high priest king thing. And at this point, the Pharisees are like, we're just going to get rid of you. Just going to get rid of you. Food poisoning. That brisket was not cooked properly. It was on the wrong side of the blue. It's a little pinkish, but it also had some tinges of green. It's just natural flora, right? So yeah, the Pharisees start a civil war to try to kill this guy and get him off the throne. And who do the Pharisees go to? The Pharisees are like, who hates our rulers as much as we do? And they go to the Seleucids. That's right. The very same Seleucids who had kept the Jewish people under dominion for 200 years. The Pharisees are going to go run up to the Seleucids and go, hey, look, if you get rid of this Alexander Jannaeus guy, we'll support whoever you put on the throne. Which is like, what? What? How do you, why? You laugh. A friend of mine once got a parasite from pulled pork and lost over 100 pounds. Oh, wow. Hey, Calm Heart, what's going on? Eat your greens. That's horrible. Intestinal parasites are nothing to laugh at. I've had intestinal parasites before. Well, I technically did not have a parasite. I had a bacterial infection. I have had an intestinal bacterial infection, and let me tell you, it is not fun. And ironically, it was from territory that Alexander Jannaeus controlled, because it was when I was in Jordan. So, yeah, we've got a good old civil war on our hands. And so from 87 to 86, we're going to be in good old-fashioned civil war. And this is pretty nasty, because the Pharisees are going to go run up with the Seleucids, and they take some of the Jewish people with them. Eat your adventure hat. Oh, no. I don't want to eat the hat. That's bad. So, who's going to support Jannaeus? So Jannaeus goes, okay, Jewish people, who's on my side? And the Sadducees are like, well, we hate the Pharisees. And that was kind of a jerk move running to the Seleucids. So the Sadducees and this other sort of esoteric mystical group called the Essenes line up with Jannaeus. And things about to get real ugly, because the Pharisees come marching back with a Seleucid army. And Jannaeus takes his army up to meet them. And not only does he defeat the Seleucid army, he also takes the opportunity to kill a whole bunch of Pharisees. Because, you done rebelled, and I'm the king, and you done messed up, Aaron. Which is actually kind of ironic, because Aaron was a pretty common Jewish name. But he might need it as a receptacle for the other side. Yeah, that's unfortunate and sad. Am I revolting? Yeah, you were. So Jannaeus not only kills a whole bunch of Seleucids and sends them packing back home, and kills a whole bunch of Pharisees, and ends the Jewish civil war, he decides that it's time to go on some expansion maneuvers, because the time is ripe and he's got a unified country behind him. Let's go get some territory. And he gets some territory. And if I can switch over to my images here without clicking randomly across the way, here's what he adds. All of this nice purple stuff. And you're like, wow, that's a lot. It is a lot. Etruria, some more of these nice coastal cities over here, the big coastal city of Gaza, and a whole bunch of territory here around the Dead Sea coastline. Yep, Gaza. Gaza's a big one. And he starts running into these people over here called the Nabateans, who we will talk about in a couple of weeks. Alexander Jannaeus is a hoss. How many miles is this for context? That is a great question. That's the intro screen. Let's come back over here and we will zoom out and we'll use our handy dandy ruler. So he's controlling roughly from right about here to right about here. That's about 200 miles. And then from right about here to right about here, that's about 130 miles. So he's got himself a nice chunk of territory. Pretty sizable. And again, what's important is that it's in this strategically located region where anything moving north or south or moving along the coastline is going to have to go through his territory. Israel's like the size of New Jersey. This was larger than modern Israel. It was a lot bigger than modern Israel. The territory that Jannaeus controlled was probably about 50% bigger than modern Israel. Yes, and there were Jewish pirates, and they were causing trouble and making a lot of money for the Jewish leadership. And things were moving pretty nice around this time. Now, one of the things that he also did, not only did he take a whole bunch of territory, he decided, I would walk 500 miles. Indeed. He decides that he wants to not only take this territory, he wants to hold it. And to do that, he's going to have to build himself some castles. And it's now time for me to put on The adventure hat. Bum, ba, da, bum. For those of you that do not know, this is the adventure hat. I wear it when I talk about places that I have been to or things that I have seen with my own eyeballs. It travels with me as I go about my world trekking in non-COVID times because, well, I sunburn really easily. But I want to show you one of Alexander Janaeus's fortresses because I've been to one. And there's his map. But we're going to look at this place. And you're like, that's a big hill. Well, this is a place called Machaerus. And it's in Jordan. And what we're looking at is this big honking hill. And in the background is the Dead Sea. And if we zoom in here, boop-a-doo-doo, you can see that on top of this big hill, there are ruins. Machaerus. Let me switch back over here and I will type it so that people know. Well, if I can get over here, type it. Do. Yeah, that's how it's spelled. Just leave it alone. You're not going to like how I spell this either, are you? No. Machaerus. Macross. Yeah, he built this whole fleet of giant robotic shape-shifting jet planes and then used them to protect the entire galaxy. This guy's going like international, but also intergalactic planetary. Planetary intergalactic. Anyway. Modern age ziggurat. So yeah, on top of the buildings here, you can see that this was a giant fortress. Well, it's not really a giant fortress. The whole site is about 5 or 6 acres. It had a pretty big based tower over here that had a really nice commanding view of the area. You got some pillars here that I know this might look nice, but they're actually reconstructed and they don't really mean anything. Archaeological sites kind of frequently have reconstructed stuff that really wasn't there in the original, but they do it because it looks nice in a picture, and it does look nice. But let's remember, this is what we're looking at. And by the way, there are caves under this mountain as well. My tour guide would not let me go dig around in the caves. I was a little bit, it wasn't our tour guide. I was traveling with a group of students and another history professor. And he knew that if I went down in the caves, the students would want to go down in the caves. And because we were legally liable for their well-being, he said that it would be a bad idea. So no caves for me. But we do have another picture. So this is a little bit of the surrounding area. And you can see what we're looking at here is sort of this rolling nice hills of Jordan. And this platform right here was the platform of the throne room slash palace. Lame. Yeah. He probably was not wrong. Yeah, I know, but I like digging around in caves. It's kind of one of my things. Which is really ironic because when we went to Turkey, I did convince him to go on the caves. And it turned out to be a giant tumulus, and that was an amazing story. But anyway, that's another story. So this is the palace and throne room of the fortress of Machaerus, built with this nice commanding view of the surrounding area. If you're standing up here and you look basically back towards the fourth wall here, you would be able to see a very pretty panoramic view of the Dead Sea. So Alexander Janaeus is building the cool stuff and making it better. A fortress without walls. Now, you know that all the stuff has pretty much fallen over because this area is very seismically active. And it was also destroyed a little bit later on by the Romans because, you know, they don't like the idea of foreign people having lots of power. Especially when they're trying to take them over. Oops, that was the wrong thing to close. Why did I do that? Give me just a second. I closed the wrong file here like a dum-dum. Okay, so what's up with this? Well, Alexander Janaeus gets old, and he's going to do the thing where he's going to try to split the throne from the high priesthood again. So he's going to leave his wife and his son in charge. But here's what he's going to do. He's going to leave his wife as queen. So his wife is queen, and his son, Hyrcanus II, is high priest. So this is going to be the fix, because Salome Alexandra was really well liked. And he thought, ruling queen, sounds good. Be progressive. Like it. And this is a scenario that gets some support. It turns out that the Pharisees rather like Salome Alexandra. There's sort of a scuttlebutt that her brother might have been a Pharisee. Because under the rule of these two, they reestablish the Jewish court. The Jewish high court is called the Sanhedrin, and it was a mix of Pharisees and Sadducees and other leaders of the Jewish community, and this was a high court that sort of acted like the Jewish Supreme Court. Things are going good. Things are going okay. And then Salome dies. And guess what Hyrcanus II decides to do? Anybody? Anybody? Well, you know what's about to happen. Hyrcanus goes, I am now both king and high priest. You knew that was coming, right? Well, his brother, Aristobulus II, goes, no. You're high priest, I'm king. That's how it's going to work. We're going to split it. And Hyrcanus II is like, no. Yeah. So by this point, the Hasmonean dynasty is pretty big. And it looks like this. It's got a lot of territory. It's pretty well secured. Things are going okay. But when things are going okay, that's when times for things to go bad again, right? You know, you can't just have peace and happy forever, right? And this is where things get real bad. Because Aristobulus wants to be king, and Hyrcanus wants to be king. Another player has entered the game, right? And so it's time to start getting the fighty again. So Aristobulus is going to be backed by the Sadducees, and he runs Hyrcanus out. That friend of the Pharisees he was. And Hyrcanus is a little miffed. Like, what you doing? You can't do that. I'm the king and the high priest, and I want my thrones back. And Aristobulus II is like, whatever, go do your thing somewhere else. So Hyrcanus goes to the enemy, and he goes to Nabatea. And he's like, hey, I know my dad beat the mess out of you, and we took a whole bunch of your territory, but it'd be real cool if you could maybe give me an army and help me get back on the throne, and then we could be friends. And Nabatea's like, sounds like a plan. Let's do it. So the Nabateans give Hyrcanus II 50,000 soldiers. And they're like, is this enough to kill your brother? And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. So he moves back in, and Aristobulus II gets pushed out. So now he's like, I'm back. But what is Aristobulus II going to do? Well, he's going to run to the Romans. Because if you're going to bring Nabatea to the party, I'm going to go bring the Romans to the party. And the Romans are like, we don't like you. We thought we were done dealing with you guys like 100 years ago. Why did Nabatea care enough to join instead of just sending their own army for both of them? Because it's nice to have a person who was of that line that you could use as a puppet. It's a lot easier to control a population if you sort of pretend that you're letting one of their own rule them. Instead, if the Nabateans had invaded the Judean region, they would have had to pacify the entire area. And the Nabateans were polytheists and did not really care very much for the monotheistic Jewish people. And it was just going to be easier for them to have the Jewish people pay them tribute and send soldiers if Nabatea wanted to go to war. That's a fair question, though. So Aristobulus is out of the group. He has left the building and has to go run to the Romans, and he runs up to Rome and he's like, my brother kicked me out of the throne. And they're like, wasn't he the rightful ruler anyway? Didn't you kick him out to begin with? And that's not why I'm here. He's being jerk. And so the Romans are like, look, man, we really don't care about this. If we get involved in this, how are you going to make it worth our while? And Aristobulus is like, I'll give you a crap ton of money. And they're like, define a lot of money. And he's like, I'll give you 400 talents of gold. And the Romans are like, okay. This would have been like billions of dollars. And the Romans are like, yeah, okay, yeah. I like this idea. Aristobulus II, you have our backing. Go get your throne back. So the Romans send an army down with Hyrcanus and with Aristobulus, and runs Hyrcanus back out. So they're playing like revolving thrones here, and there's only one. Yeah, not like a civic. Oh, the puppy has entered the game. Do you want to come and see me? You want to get some free puppies? Come here. Hello, Woofles. Oh, hello, puppy. I see you. I heard you. You were outside woofing at all the neighbor puppies, weren't you? And I heard you a-wooing, too. Did you do an a-woo? You did. You did. Oh, my goodness. Your little ears are freezing. Oh, goodness gracious. What? Do you want to come back and see me again? No? Are you going to walk around me and try to come up over here? What are you doing? Okay, now you're done. Okay, you got your sugars in, and now I'm just the guy that gives you food again. Anyway, silly dog. Yeah, so there can be only one because there's only one throne. And the brothers are having fights with each other, and they're bringing in all the meanie guys. The Romans and Nabateans are just supposed to do this stuff. So this doesn't end where it stopped right there, because Hyrcanus II is still alive. Aristobulus is on the throne again. Now you're just some puppy that we used to know. Oh. And Hyrcanus has to retreat. But there's some crazy stuff that goes down in Rome, and a new guy takes over. And this guy is going to be a pretty big deal, and we'll talk about him in later streams. This guy that sort of looks like Hank Hill without the sunglasses of the ancient world. This guy's name is Pompey Magnus. Good old Pompey. Pompey was one of the three, it's not Pompey, it's Pompey. It's with a Y instead of the I's. It's Pompey. Pompeii is the city that got wrecked by Vesuvius. It's Pompey. Pompey. Yep. And then you go, that's kind of a weird name. And it kind of is, but Romans. So Pompey is going to be in charge of this Syria region, because by this point Rome had conquered the Seleucid Empire. Spoilers. And Hyrcanus goes, this is my chance. I'm going to go to the new Roman guy, and I'm going to get the new Roman guy on my side. And so in 63 BC, Hyrcanus runs up to Pompey and goes, hey, I know my brother bribed that other guy that used to be here, but I would like to be the throne holder of the Hasmonean dynasty. And Pompey's like, who are you again? He's like, I'm Hyrcanus, and I'm the rightful king. And he's like, well, why aren't you on the throne? He's like, well, my brother is kind of a jerk, and I got ran off by him, but then I kicked him out, but then he ran me off again, and now I'm still kind of run off. And Pompey's like, oh, so you're the weak little punk guy. And Hyrcanus is like, no, I don't like that. I don't like the words you're using. I reject that classification. And Pompey's like, if you're the weak little punk guy, I would really like for you to be in charge because it's a lot easier to push around a little punk dude than it is some guy with some smarts. And Hyrcanus is like, I heard you're going to put me on the throne. That's what I'm going to take away from this conversation. So if that's what you want to do, go for it. So Pompey's like, yeah, okay, I've got a nice Roman legion here. We'll march down there. We'll get rid of your brother for you, and we'll put you on the throne. And Hyrcanus is like, this sounds awesome. Coming back with a bigger Roman army. Yeah, take that junk, brother. So they get down to Jerusalem, and Aristobulus refuses to give up. Like, he barricades himself in the city and ends up pulling the army into the city and manning the walls. And Pompey's like, look, dude, you are beaten. And you really do not want me to have to come in there and get you. Because if I have to come in there and get you, it ain't gonna be pretty. And Aristobulus is like, I'm the king and the high priest and you can't do anything about it. And Pompey's like, all right, here we go. And they break into Jerusalem. And the Romans decide, while we're at it, just loot the city. Because, I mean, they can't really do anything about it. Just loot the city. Anything that you want, you guys just go ahead and take it. And that seems to get a little bit uncomfortable because Hyrcanus is like, I didn't say anything about you looting the city. And Pompey's like, what you gonna do about it? You gonna get mad? Where's your army? You gonna call your army up? No. And then Pompey's like, hey, I hear you got a pretty cool temple. Let's go check it out. And Hyrcanus is like, I mean, I can show you the walls, but you're not Jewish, and you're really not supposed to go into the temple because you're not Jewish. Like, and in fact, you're not even really supposed to go into like even the outer courtyard because you're not Jewish. And Pompey's like, no, I want to see this temple. And so Pompey like just kind of strolls into the temple, and all the Jewish people are like, no, no, no. And then he's like, so where do you do all the sacrificey stuff? And Hyrcanus is like, in there. And he's like, oh, so, okay, so that's like the inner sanctum of the temple. And they're like, yeah, but you can't go in there. And he's like, why not? He's like, because only the high priest can go in there. And he can only go in there like one day of the year. And Pompey's like, oh, I got to go check this out. So Pompey's just like, look at all this cool stuff. And take all that, by the way. Like all that gold stuff. Oh, yeah, let's just take all of that. So Pompey like loots the temples, like wandering around in the temple, taking all the cool stuff. Yeah, this is like the Trump of like, don't look directly at the solar eclipse. And Pompey's like, it's pretty. Oh, goodness. So Jerusalem as a city gets wrecked pretty badly. The temple gets despoiled. The temple also gets defamed because Pompey's just like, I want to touch everything. Yeah. So the purification rite is in order, by the way. And so when all of this is done, Aristobulus goes away, and he gets put in jail. And Hyrcanus gets put on the position of high priest. You are a high priest, and Hyrcanus is like, cool. What about that king thing? And Pompey goes, I really don't like the idea that you guys have kings. So we're not going to do the king thing anymore. You guys don't get to have kings. And Hyrcanus is like, but that was part of the deal. And Pompey's like, I have altered the deal. Pray that I do not alter it any further. Yep. And Hyrcanus is like, well, do I at least get a cool title that means I'm politically in charge? And Pompey's like, I can make something up. Like, do you just want me to make something up? And he's like, I'd appreciate it. So Hyrcanus gets the title Ethnarch. Ethnarch. Yeah, which means ruler of a group of people. So ethno, like ethnic, archos, meaning ruler. Ruler of a people. Ethnarch. And I've always joked that this sounds like the thing that Beldar has to fight at the end of Coneheads, which is actually called the Nartharch, but Ethnarch, you know what I mean. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Coneheads. It's a pretty funny movie. Beldar for his sins against the crime has to Narthol Garthark. So, anyway, there's that. Go watch Coneheads. Also, if you all did not get the Empire Strikes Back reference, I am very upset. I'm a little bit sad that nobody called out the fact that I did a Goonies reference in last Tuesday's stream. I thought it was rather brilliantly done, and nobody responded to it. That hurt my soul a little bit. You almost said I understood that reference. Okay. Moose, I know you're just joshing. I know that you're just pulling my chain and trying to get a rise out of me. Oh yeah, there's a great Goonies reference in the pirate stream. I mentioned that one of the pirates in the heyday of the Golden Age was One-Eye Willie, who took his treasure up to the New England coastline and hid it in a cave where it was discovered by a bunch of kids in the 80s, and they used the treasure to buy back their family's land from evil land developers. Like, come on, man. That's a great thing. That's a great reference. Okay, you got it. Okay. So maybe it was just so universally accepted that people did not feel as if they needed to. Okay, that makes me feel better. But if you didn't get the Empire Strikes Back line, you need to go watch Empire Strikes Back again. Okay, so Hyrcanus, yeah, he's the Ethnarch. Yeah, okay, whatever. Here's the thing, though. He doesn't really actually run anything. He doesn't run anything. He's basically a Roman puppet. And he doesn't even really have a lot of control over the region. But there's a little bit of stuff that happens. Why is the Emperor always going on strike? Well, when you have that many people and you force labor, your unions are going to get a little upset, right? So the fortunes of the Jewish people change with this guy. This guy, old Julius, Orange Julius Caesar. Good old Julius Caesar. Now, Caesar has an interesting relationship with the Jewish people. First off, he doesn't really understand them. Because, again, they're monotheists. And monotheists just... what's up with the one God thing, right? So he decides that maybe having these Jewish people on his side is a big deal. Especially because one of his opponents is Pompey. And, you know, once he takes over from Pompey, he feels like he could get some good nature out of the people that had maybe been squished by Pompey, like the Jewish people. And he's like, okay, Hyrcanus, here's the deal. I will actually let you rule the Jewish people. You can be Ethnarch in not only name, but in action. You can actually be the ruler. But you got to be friends with me. And Hyrcanus is like, I don't care. But Hyrcanus ends up dying in 40, and his nephew takes over. This guy's name is Antigonus, and this guy is a bit of a mess. Because when he takes over, he doesn't take over... Well, I said this badly. Like, Hyrcanus eventually dies, but before he dies, his nephew is going to take over. Is he antagonistic? He is antagonistic. And Antigonus, by the way, purely Greek name. So, Antigonus was the son of Aristobulus, who thought that he should have been king, right? His dad was king, his dad was high priest, now his uncle's in charge. And in 40, Antigonus is going to get really upset that his uncle Hyrcanus is still in charge. I should probably put Hyrcanus back up here. So Antigonus is going to go find somebody that is bigger and badder than the Romans. So who would be the biggest and the baddest people on the side of Asia at the moment? And that is the Parthians. Antigonus goes to Parthia, which sounds like a really bad after-school special. Antigonus goes to Parthia. Antigonus, after losing out on the throne because his uncle kicked his father out with the help of Rome, and then gets Julius Caesar to like him, assuring the fact that Hyrcanus' family line would rule forever, Antigonus goes to Parthia and goes, I hate my uncle and his family, please help me kill them. Yeah. So the Parthians are like, wait, you want to get rid of the guy that the Romans like? We're in. So Parthia sends an army with Antigonus to put Antigonus on the throne. And this gets real weird because Antigonus manages to get into the city and manages to take over Jerusalem. And he gets his uncle. He catches his uncle. And he's like, okay, so here's what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to peacefully give me power. I would like for you to give me the position of ethnarch, and I would like for you to give me the position of high priest. And Hyrcanus is like, dude, you just brought like these even weirder big bads into the game. I'm not giving you either. And so Antigonus decides that he's going to play a really weird card here. So he embraces his uncle, and while he's embracing his uncle, he bites his uncle's ear off. Just like gnaws it off. Just and you go, why would he do that? Like, is he in a boxing match against Evander Holyfield? Like, what's the deal with biting his ear off? But remember, Antigonus, I'm going to kick my uncle Hyrcanus off the throne. I'm going to be high priest. I'll bite your ear off. Antigonus, the high priest. Yeah, so remember, and I mentioned this earlier on purpose, a priest had to be inviolate, and they could not have deformities. So when Antigonus bit his uncle's ear off, that made his uncle illegitimately a priest. So he could not claim position of leadership anymore because he had been violated. I was wishing I could have thought of a better joke. Antigonus was perfect. Antigonus. Settle down there, Mike, right? So he bites his uncle's ear off. His uncle can no longer be in the position of leadership. And Antigonus is going to go, all right, now I am king and I am high priest. And Rome took that personally. Caesar goes, wait a second. That was my friend. I was friends with Hyrcanus. Why'd you go do that for? Antigonus is like, I'm friends with Parthia now, Joker. Yeah, no. Rome sends in the army. The Parthians realize real fast, like, they don't actually want to tangle with Rome at this juncture, especially over the kingship of the Judean region. And Caesar took that personally. Rome shows up. Antigonus gets right out. And this is going to actually end the line of the Hasmoneans. Because Rome goes, all right, we're done with your entire line. You're just causing way too much trouble. This whole back and forth, ear-biting junk has just got to end. Who can we get that would suck up to us? And there's a guy named Herod. Now, Herod is not technically a Jewish person. He was an Idumean. So he was one of these people that had been forcibly converted to Judaism. And he's like, I'm a big, powerful, rich guy. And Rome's like, done. You. Herod the Great, this guy. And they go, you are in charge. And that's the end of these Hasmoneans. So there we go. And we'll leave it there with Herod. Yeah, there's a guy named Antipater, but that's very brief. And we'll talk about Antipas and all these other people maybe later on. So, that's the end of the Hasmonean dynasty. And I've talked a lot tonight. Technically, they're Azerothian. They're from the Far Plains, and they're some of those panda people. So, yeah. We're going to bring in... Ooh, I didn't mean to close that. Okay. So at this point, Rome is pretty much in charge. The Hasmoneans are no more. And the Jewish people are more or less no longer independent. It was a good run while it lasted, though. Hasmoneans. Oh, I see it. The I got it. Those were the boss of the Scarlet Monastery Armory. Okay, see, I've never actually played World of Warcraft. I know a little bit about the lore from other friends that have played it, and I know Leroy Jenkins, and I know Onyxia Wipe, but I don't know too terribly much about that stuff. Okay, so here we go. That's the end of what I had prepared for the night, but as always, that doesn't mean we have to be through. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk about anything or redeem any channel points, now would be the time. I've killed that boss many, many times. I can't play MMORPGs because if it doesn't have an ending, I never stop playing it. Prefer farming. All right. Anybody got anything? So next stream is next Thursday. We're going to be talking about Armenia and Pontus, another couple of these little kingdoms that kind of sprung up out of the collapse of the Seleucids. And it's going to be some fun stuff. I have not been to Israel or Palestine. I would love to go. I've been across the river to, I've been to Jordan, and I've been all over Jordan, but I have not been to Israel. There are a lot of places that I would love to get to, though. I'd love to go to Lebanon. I mean, I'd love to go to Egypt and Syria, too, but travel right now, of course, is COVID, but even in the best of situations, Egypt is pretty rough right now, and Syria is just right out. You could probably get to Lebanon. Things around there have cooled off to the point where I would be okay to travel. Had it been 3 or 4 years ago when they were lobbing shells at northern Israel every other day, probably not the best time to go visit, but I would go to Lebanon right now. It'd be okay. Yeah, the United States State Department doesn't like me going over there. They didn't, well, doesn't matter. Freedom. Okay. So, questions, comments. We're getting visited by the puppy again. You want to come back on stream? You want to come back up here? Come on. Come on. Come on. Hey, come here. Oh, you just want me to scratch your booty? Hey, come here. Come and see me. There we go. Oh, you get some more free puppy. Oh, yes. Oh, sugars. What are you're pulling the tablecloth. What are you have giant mutant puppy feet. And you just don't understand what you're doing with your giant mutant puppy feet. I know it. I know. You're so awkwardly shaped. It's like there's a big box of leftover puppy parts, and they're like, oh, just throw it all together. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. You want to look right here? Say hey to everybody. Hey, look right here. That's about as long as my attention span lasts, humans. You have about 2 seconds. If I were to travel internationally for non-history reasons, where would I go? See, that's a trick question. Because when I travel, it doesn't matter if I go for personal reasons or not. I'm going to find history where I go. If I were to just go on vacation and I were going purely to just enjoy myself, I would probably go back to Crete, or I would go to northern part of Italy, or to the southwestern coast of Turkey. So, right around here. Or this island right here of Crete, or the northern region of Italy up here. Belize is, well, I mean, Belize is absolutely for history. I would like to go to Belize because there are all sorts of really cool Mayan ruins down there that I want to go climb around on. If you put googly eyes on the webcam, the puppy will look at it for longer than 2 seconds. No, she might try to eat it. Yeah, so I like traveling. Crete was better than the rest, but still full of Greek pain. So, Mac, what if I told you that we were going to fly in to Heraklion directly, um, skip the entire ferry situation, and not go back to Knossos? If we were just going to stay in Malia and do like Malia beach stuff and just eat the seafood. You could handle flying direct. Yeah. So flying to Heraklion. Don't go to Knossos. Don't go to Greek Disneyland. Go over in Malia and never do the ferry again. Yeah. If I go to Japan, I'm going to end up doing history over there. That's not going to be a full leisure vacation. That needs to be about that vacation probably needs to be about 3 weeks long, and it needs to be a week where Brittany and I go over with Mac, and we stay in and around Tokyo for a week and do maybe day trips to stuff, but stay in the same place. And then Brittany goes back home, and then Mac and I do a sprint where we go to all of the places for 2 weeks. And even 2 weeks would not be enough for me in Japan. I completely understand wanting to stay in one place and being sedentary on vacation. But my history vacations are very, very active. We get up early, we go see lots of stuff, we go to sleep late, we get up early and do it again. Lunch is very frequently whatever you can sneak out of the breakfast buffet. If you ever want to know what a full-out archaeological survey trip with me is like, message Mac on the Discord, and he can give you the lowdown. Or Mac, could you sum it up in like 1 or 2 sentences what it's like? Or we could just live there for a few years. Living in Japan, oh man, we are not half rich enough to live in Japan for 2 years. Lord have mercy, that would be way out of our budget. Even with stuff like with assistance, like if we were to get some sort of, like, if I could find a teaching job at a university in Japan and they were to help us with living conditions, it would still be way expensive. Now, I would love it, and I would need to rent a storage unit back here in the States so that I could ship all of the Gundam models that I would be buying back to KP or back to Mac so that they could put them in storage. Shane visiting sites. Move fast, hit them all, do not rest. That's accurate, which is cool unless you catch the plague. But luckily, Greece sells amoxicillin over the counter. Are there not a Mississippi of Japan? There is a Mississippi of Japan. It's called Hokkaido. But it's on the far north island, and getting anywhere from there is a pain in the neck and very expensive. Because the really, really cool stuff that there's cool stuff in Hokkaido that I want to go see. And that would take me a couple of weeks to go see all the cool stuff up in Hokkaido. But once I did that, I would want to go down to Honshu, and I'd want to go to all of the big castles. And yeah, and it's also very cold, and I don't think Brittany would like Hokkaido. Oh yeah, living in Japan, even in rural areas, is pretty expensive, and a lot of people that live in rural areas have really long commutes. Um, so, yep, yep. It's one of the highest cost of living in the industrialized world. Yep, and space is at a premium, as KP here is insinuating. I mean, it would, and it's hard to find jobs over there anyway, especially as a non-resident. There are there are very very few things that would work. I can find you cheap places in the country, but there will be no commuting. Yeah, see that's the thing. Like you can either live somewhere that can commute into a city and work, or you live in the country and you have nothing. And I also don't want to live in a shoebox. um, so one day when I become pro streamer Twitch famous and I have bajillions of followers and I make enough money to live off of streaming adventures in history, and I can do that from anywhere in the world, that might open up as an option. Um, so send your friends this way so I can go live in Japan. Oh, that was super selfish, and I don't want you to encourage people to come here unless you think that they would have a good time. I'm not about. Uh, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not doing this for the number of followers that I get or anything like that. And I say that with a follower goal right here, but that's actually more for you all than it is for me. I would be here talking just like this if there were like two people in the room. You learned during the bubble years the gardens around the royal palace in Tokyo were worth as much as all the land in California. Holy moly, that's crazy, Motivic. That is insane. Good gracious. All right, ladies and gents. Anything else? Anybody want to spend some points or ask a question or do anything before we go? I think we're going to go raid Tony Moy. Great watercolorist. Is doing some really cool stuff. If you don't know who Tony Moy is, you should. He's a great guy, cool stream, amazingly talented watercolorist. But we don't have to go. Anybody got anything else? I'm not seeing anything, so. All right, let's just hit the raid button. All right, so we're going to go raid Tony. Really cool guy. Make sure that you throw him a follow and share some love with him. If you have the adventure hat emote, when we break in, our raid call is adventure, and then throwing all of the adventure hats that you can throw in. If you don't have that, you can just yell the adventure and just use a whole bunch of exclamation marks. That'll work too. So we're going to go raid Tony. I very rarely get to raid Tony because he's usually not streaming when I am, so this is a rare treat, and I'm rather excited to go bring you all over to check out his stream. So thank you all again very, very much for hanging out. I appreciate everybody for making this a very enjoyable stream. You all are awesome. And assuming I get done with this paper thing, we might do some Gundam stuff over the weekend, but I can't promise that. I don't really know how things are going to go. But I will definitely see you next Thursday night, 1900 Central Standard Time. Until then, have a good one.